The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as I heard my 15-year-old daughter's voice cutting through the garage air like a rusty blade. "He's boring, Mom. You deserve fun. Sean's way better anyway." I froze under the hood of my pickup truck, engine parts scattered around me like the pieces of my apparently crumbling marriage. Pierce Eldrow, 43 years old, owner of Eldrow Electric, and apparently the most clueless husband in this faded Midwestern town. "Izzy, keep your voice down," came my wife's response from the kitchen window above. Cleo's voice carried that lawyer-sharp edge she used when cross-examining witnesses. "Your father might hear." Too late for that, I thought, wiping my hands on an old rag. The October evening had settled over our neighborhood like a worn blanket, streetlights flickering on one by one. Mrs. Harper next door was probably already positioning herself behind her curtains, ready to catch whatever drama was about to unfold. I'd been suspicious for weeks. Cleo's late nights at the law firm had multiplied. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages she'd quickly hide. New lingerie appeared in her drawer, stuff I'd never seen her wear for me. And then there were the jokes about needing a vacation for marriage and finding someone more exciting. She's working overtime, all right, I thought grimly. Just not for my benefit. The front door slammed, and I heard Cleo's heels clicking down our driveway. Through the garage window, I watched her slide into her silver BMW, the one she'd insisted we lease even though my electrical business was having a rough year. She backed out without even glancing toward the garage where I stood, covered in motor oil and apparently invisible. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Check your email, you deserve to know. A friend." I wiped my hands again and pulled up my email on my phone. What I saw made my stomach drop like a stone down a well. Screenshots. Lots of them. Cleo and some guy at Romano's wine bar downtown. Text messages between them that made me feel like I was reading someone else's nightmare. And a selfie of them, in what was clearly a hotel room. Her wearing that red lingerie I'd never seen. The guy was Sean Rader. I recognized him from Izzy's Instagram posts, some real estate hotshot she'd been gushing about for months. Apparently he was more than just her mother's gym friend. I stared at the photos until my eyes burned. 20 years of marriage. 20 years of building a life together, of me working my tail off to support her law school dreams, of believing we were a team. Guess the team just got traded, I thought, my inner voice taking on that sarcastic edge that had gotten me through every other crisis in my life. I forwarded the email to myself and deleted the original. Then I did something I'd never done before in our marriage. I started planning. The next morning, Cleo was already gone when I came down for coffee. She'd left a note. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. C." Not love Cleo or even XOXO, just C, like I was some client she was brushing off. Izzy shuffled into the kitchen in her pajamas, phone already glued to her hand. "Dad, can you drive me to school? Mom's car is already gone." "Sure, kiddo." I studied her face, wondering how long she'd known about her mother's extracurricular activities. "Everything okay at home? You seem, I don't know, different lately?" She shrugged without looking up from her screen. "Everything's fine. Just tired of the same old routine, you know? Mom says change is good sometimes." I bet she does, I thought. At Manny's boxing gym that evening, I pounded the heavy bag until my knuckles were raw through the gloves. Coach Manny, a 60-year-old former Marine who'd been teaching me to fight since I was Izzy's age, watched me with knowing eyes. "Whatever's eating you, Pierce, you're going to wear out my equipment," he said, holding the bag steady. "Want to talk about it?" "My wife's having an affair," I said between punches, "with some real estate pretty boy named Sean Rader." Manny nodded like he'd been expecting this news. Figured it was something like that. You want to win this fight, you gotta hit him where it hurts, but don't get caught throwing the first punch. What's that supposed to mean? Means you're smarter than both of them put together. Use that brain of yours. Make them think they're winning until it's too late to back out. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. That night, I sat in my home office, the small room above the garage where I did paperwork for the business, and started researching. Sean Rader owned Rader Real Estate, one of those flashy operations with billboards all over town featuring his perfect smile and expensive suits. But a little digging revealed some interesting facts. His business was leveraged to the hilt. He'd been sued twice in the past year for contract disputes. And according to public records, he was behind on his luxury condo payments. So Cleo's trading down, after all, I thought. She just doesn't know it yet. I spent the next 3 days gathering information like I was preparing to rewire an entire house, methodically, carefully, making sure every connection was solid. I drove past Sean's condo complex and noted when Cleo's car was there. I took photos. I made copies of our joint bank statements and noticed several cash withdrawals I couldn't account for. Large ones. Thursday evening, I was waiting in the kitchen when Cleo came home at nearly midnight, her hair slightly mussed and her lipstick gone. "Working late again?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. She startled, clearly not expecting me to be awake. "Yes, the Henderson case is really demanding. Lots of late-night strategy sessions. With the whole team? Of course. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm exhausted. I'm going straight to bed." "Cleo, wait." I stood up, and for a moment, I considered laying all my cards on the table. Showing her the photos, demanding an explanation, maybe even giving her a chance to come clean and work things out. Then I remembered Izzy's words from that first night. "He's boring, Mom. Sean's better anyway." "No," I decided. "They want to play games. Let's see how good they really are at it." "I was thinking," I said instead, "maybe we should take that vacation you mentioned, get away from the routine." Her face went pale. "Oh, Pierce, actually, work is so crazy right now. Maybe we should wait until things settle down." "Sure," I said, smiling. "No rush. When you're ready." She practically ran upstairs. I waited until I heard the shower running. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, Jim Morrison, no relation to the singer, as he constantly reminded people. The second was to a private investigator I'd done electrical work for last year. "Jim, it's Pierce Eldrow. I need to talk to you about divorce proceedings." "I'm sorry to hear that, Pierce. When do you want to meet?" "Tomorrow morning. And Jim, I want to make sure I understand all my options. All of them." The next morning, I was installing new wiring at the courthouse, ironically in the family law section, when I saw them together. Cleo and Sean having what looked like an intimate conversation by the coffee cart in the lobby. She was laughing at something he said, touching his arm, looking at him the way she used to look at me. Sean Rader was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average height, smooth where I was rough around the edges, expensive suit where I wore work clothes. He looked like he'd never changed a tire or fixed a leaky faucet in his life. But I bet he's never rewired a house either, I thought. Let's see how he handles it when the power gets cut. That evening, I did something I'd never done in 20 years of marriage. I followed my wife. She said she was working late, but instead of heading to her law firm, she drove straight to Sean's luxury condo complex on the east side of town. I parked across the street and watched her use a key to let herself into his building. A key. She has her own key. I sat there for 2 hours, taking photos with my phone, making notes of times and license plates. When I finally drove home, I felt like a different person. Not Pierce the faithful husband, not Pierce the reliable electrician. Someone harder. Someone who was finally ready to fight back. Mrs. Harper was conveniently checking her mailbox when I pulled into my driveway at nearly 11 p.m. "Working late tonight, Pierce?" she called out, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Something like that," I replied. "You know how it is, Mrs. Harper. Sometimes you have to put in extra effort to get the job done right." She smiled in a way that made me think she knew exactly what job I was talking about. The next morning, Cleo was already gone again, but she'd left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. I knew her password. It was Izzy's birthday, same as it had been for years. What I found in her email made my hands shake with rage. Messages going back 6 months, hotel reservations, restaurant bookings, and a particularly detailed message about how boring and predictable I was, how she deserved better, and how Sean made her feel alive again. 20 years, I thought. 20 years of marriage, and I'm boring and predictable. I forwarded the most damaging emails to my own account, then carefully deleted them from her sent folder. If she was going to play dirty, I needed ammunition. That afternoon, I was replacing a circuit breaker at the high school when I overheard 2 teachers talking in the hallway. "Did you see Izzy Eldrow's latest TikTok video?" one of them said. Something about her parents. Pretty harsh stuff. I pulled out my phone and found Izzy's account. The video made me feel like I'd been punched in the gut. There was my daughter talking about how some people just settle for boring and how real men take risks and live exciting lives. The hashtags included "try your upgrade in the house" and "Hodge dad problems." Even my own daughter thinks I'm a loser, I realized. They're all in on it. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be the boring, predictable husband anymore. I wasn't going to be the guy who just took whatever life handed him and smiled politely. I was going to become someone they'd never forget. I started with Sean's car. Saturday night, while Cleo was supposedly at her book club, another lie I'd easily verified, I drove to Sean's condo complex with a bag of tools and a head full of rage. His precious silver Porsche was parked in his assigned spot, gleaming under the parking lot lights like a monument to everything I wasn't. I'd done my homework. The building's security cameras had blind spots, and the weekend security guard spent most of his time inside watching television. I popped the hood and got to work. 25 years as an electrician had taught me a lot about making things stop working. A few disconnected wires here, some creative rerouting there, and Sean's pride and joy would be making some very interesting noises the next time he tried to impress my wife. For good measure, I loosened his license plate bolts and put a small nail under his rear tire, not enough to cause a blowout, just enough to ensure a slow leak that would leave him stranded at the most inconvenient moment possible. Let's see how exciting he is when he's calling for roadside assistance, I thought. As I was closing the hood, I heard footsteps. Mrs. Harper emerged from the shadows near the building entrance, her phone in her hand. "Evening, Pierce," she said with that knowing smile of hers. "Fancy meeting you here?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "Mrs. Harper, what are you doing here?" "Oh, I have a friend who lives in this building. We were having coffee, and I saw you from her window." She held up her phone. "Got some interesting photos, too. Don't worry, dear. Your secret's safe with me, for now." She walked away, leaving me standing there with my tools in my hand and the sinking realization that I'd just given the neighborhood's biggest gossip some premium ammunition. Great, I thought. Now I'm the one who's going to be the talk of the town. But as I drove home, I realized something else. Mrs. Harper hadn't seemed shocked to see me there. If anything, she'd seemed pleased, like she'd been expecting this moment. Which meant she probably knew about Cleo and Sean already. The whole neighborhood knows, I realized. Everyone except the husband, as usual. Sunday morning brought the first real confrontation. Cleo was making coffee when I came downstairs, and she looked like she hadn't slept well. "How was book club?" I asked innocently. "Fine. We discussed that new thriller everyone's reading." She wasn't looking at me, focusing intently on measuring coffee grounds. "Which one?" "Oh, you know, the one about the marriage that falls apart." "How appropriate." "Sounds depressing," I said. "Maybe you should read something more uplifting, like a story where people actually keep their promises." She finally looked at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. A guilt? Fear? Or maybe just annoyance that I was interrupting her morning routine. "Pierce, is everything okay? You've been acting strange lately." "Strange." "Right. Because wanting to know where my wife spends her evenings is strange." "I'm fine, Cleo. Just thinking about some changes I want to make. You know, shake up the routine a little. Make things more exciting." Her coffee mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the kitchen floor. Coffee splashed everywhere, and she stared at the mess like she couldn't figure out how it had happened. "I'll clean it up," she said quickly, grabbing paper towels. "Don't worry about it," I said, kneeling down to help. "Accidents happen. Sometimes things just break." That afternoon I was working in the garage when Izzy came home from wherever she'd been spending her weekends lately. She walked past without saying hello, her face buried in her phone as usual. "Izzy," I called out, "come here for a minute." She sighed dramatically but wandered over. "What's up, Dad?" "I saw your TikTok video, the one about boring people." Her cheeks flushed red. "It wasn't about you specifically, wasn't it?" She shifted from foot to foot, suddenly looking younger than her 15 years. "Dad, sometimes I think you could try harder, you know? Mom works so hard, and she's always stressed, and maybe if you were more like Sean?" The words hung in the air between us. Izzy's eyes went wide. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but her voice was small and unconvincing. "Sure you do, kiddo. You've been posting about him for months. Your mom's exciting new friend who takes risks and lives life to the fullest." Tears started forming in her eyes. "Dad, I didn't mean—" "It's okay," I said, and surprisingly, I meant it. "You're 15. You don't understand how complicated adult relationships can be. But here's something you should know about excitement, Izzy. It's not always a good thing. Sometimes the most exciting thing that can happen to you is also the thing that ruins your life." She ran into the house, leaving me alone with my tools and my thoughts. Monday brought news that Sean's car troubles had been even more spectacular than I'd hoped. According to Mrs. Harper, who made a point of stopping by while I was loading my work truck, Sean had been stranded at a client meeting and had to call a tow truck. The repair bill was apparently substantial. "Funny how these things happen," she said, watching my face carefully. "Expensive cars can be so unreliable." "German engineering," I replied. "Sometimes all those fancy features just give you more things that can break." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "You're absolutely right, Pierce. The simple, reliable things are often the most valuable." That evening, Cleo announced she was working late again, another strategy session with her team. Which team members will be there? I asked. Oh, the usual suspects. You don't know them. Try me. She rattled off a list of names, but I caught the hesitation before she mentioned Jennifer Walsh, the firm's senior partner. I knew Jennifer from various community events, and I knew she was out of town this week at a legal conference in Chicago. Sloppy, Cleo. Very sloppy. After she left, I called Jennifer's office. Walsh, Martinez, and Associates. This is Jennifer. Jennifer, it's Pierce Eldrow. I thought you were in Chicago this week. I am in Chicago. I'm calling you from my hotel room. Is everything all right? Everything's fine. Cleo mentioned you were having a late strategy session tonight, and I wanted to make sure she had your hotel information in case she needed to reach you. There was a long pause. Pierce, I haven't spoken to Cleo since last Tuesday. We don't have any strategy sessions scheduled this week. Gotcha. My mistake, I said. I must have misunderstood. Pierce, is there something I should know about? Jennifer Walsh was sharp, and she'd been practicing family law long enough to recognize the sound of a marriage in trouble. Not yet, I said, but there might be soon. That night, I drove past Sean's condo again. Cleo's car was there, parked in the visitors section like she owned the place. I took more photos, noted the time, and then I did something that surprised even me. I walked up to the building's main entrance and pressed the buzzer for Sean's unit. Yeah? His voice came through the intercom, sounding relaxed and confident. Pizza delivery? I said, disguising my voice. I didn't order any pizza. Says here Sean Rader, Unit 412. Large pepperoni, extra cheese? Look, I told you, I didn't order. Maybe your girlfriend ordered it as a surprise, I suggested. Lady with a BMW? Says here she wanted it to be special. There was silence for a long moment. Then, leave it at the front desk. I'll get it later. Coward, I thought. Can't even face the pizza guy. But I'd gotten what I wanted. Confirmation that he knew exactly which girlfriend I was talking about, and evidence that he was too much of a coward to handle even minor confrontations. This is going to be easier than I thought. Tuesday morning, I was installing new outlets at the courthouse when I ran into Detective Ray Harris, a guy I'd gone to high school with. Ray had been asking me to wire his new deck for months, and we'd been trying to coordinate schedules. Pierce, perfect timing. I was just about to call you. Can you come by this weekend to look at that electrical work? Sure thing, Ray. How's the crime-fighting business? Same old stuff. Petty theft, domestic disputes, the occasional real estate fraud case. He lowered his voice. Speaking of which, you know a guy named Sean Rader? My pulse quickened. Real estate agent, right? Why? We've had a few complaints about his business practices. Nothing criminal, but some clients feel like he's been less than honest about property values and financing options. Just thought you should know, since I heard through the grapevine that he's been spending time with some of the local professional crowd. Interesting. Very interesting. Thanks for the heads up, Ray. No problem. Sometimes it pays to know who you're dealing with before you get too involved. If only he knew how involved things had already gotten. That afternoon, I made a decision that would escalate everything. I called Cleo's office and asked to speak with her directly. She's in a meeting, her secretary said. Can I take a message? This is her husband. It's important. A few minutes later, Cleo's voice came on the line, tight with anxiety. Pierce, what's wrong? Is Izzy okay? Izzy's fine. I was just wondering if you wanted to have dinner tonight. Somewhere nice. Just the two of us. Oh. She sounded genuinely surprised. That's sweet, Pierce, but I really do have to work late tonight. Rain check? Of course. Maybe tomorrow? Maybe. I'll have to check my schedule. Your schedule with Sean, you mean? No problem. Hey, Cleo? Yes? I love you. You know that, right? Another long pause. Yes, Pierce. I know. But she didn't say it back. That night, instead of following her to Sean's condo, I stayed home and did something I should have done weeks ago. I called my lawyer. Jim, it's Pierce. I think it's time we had that conversation about my options. I was wondering when you'd call back. What's your timeline? Soon, very soon. But I want to make sure I do this right. I want to make sure when this is over, everyone knows exactly what happened and why. Pierce, I have to ask, you're not planning anything illegal, are you? Nothing illegal, Jim. But I'm done being the nice guy who gets walked on. I'm done being boring and predictable. All right, come in tomorrow morning. We'll go over everything. As I hung up, I heard Cleo's car in the driveway. It was almost 2 a.m. I pretended to be asleep when she slipped into bed, but I could smell Sean's cologne on her clothes. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow everything changes. Wednesday morning, I met with Jim Morrison at his office downtown, 3 blocks from where my wife was supposedly working late every night. Jim was a straight shooter, the kind of lawyer who'd rather lose a case than compromise his integrity, which was exactly why I'd chosen him. Pierce, I've drawn up some preliminary paperwork based on our phone conversation, he said, sliding a folder across his desk. But before we proceed, I need to understand exactly what evidence you have and how you obtained it. I opened my own folder and spread out everything I'd collected. Photos of Cleo's car at Sean's condo, copies of the emails she'd sent about how boring I was, bank statements showing the cash withdrawals, screenshots of Izzy's social media posts. Jim whistled low. This is thorough work. Almost too thorough. You're sure you didn't break any laws getting this information? Everything here is either from public sources, our joint accounts, or things I observed personally. No hacking, no breaking and entering, no wiretapping. Good, because if you want to come out of this with your reputation intact, we need to make sure your hands are completely clean. He studied the photos more closely. How long has this been going on? At least 6 months, based on the emails. Maybe longer. And the daughter knows? She's been encouraging it. Apparently I'm an embarrassment to the family. Jim leaned back in his chair. Pierce, I have to ask. What's your endgame here? Do you want to try counseling, or are you looking for a clean break? I thought about Cleo slipping into bed at 2 a.m., smelling like another man. I thought about Izzy's TikTok videos calling me boring. I thought about 20 years of marriage and how quickly it had all become meaningless. I want them to understand what they've lost, I said. I want them to realize that boring and predictable isn't the same thing as worthless. Revenge isn't really the legal system's strong suit, Pierce. I'm not talking about the legal system. Jim raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? I'm talking about making sure the truth comes out, all of it, in a way that everyone in this town will remember. Pierce, nothing illegal, Jim, I promise. But I'm done hiding in the shadows while they make a fool out of me. That afternoon, I put the first phase of my plan into action. I called Mrs. Harper. Mrs. Harper, it's Pierce Eldrow. I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee sometime. I think we have some mutual interests to discuss. She practically purred into the phone. I was wondering when you'd call, dear. How about this afternoon, Romano's Wine Bar? Romano's. The same place where Cleo and Sean had their romantic rendezvous. Perfect. See you at 4. Mrs. Harper was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a clear view of the entire restaurant. She dressed up for the occasion, full makeup, jewelry, the works. Pierce, you look terrible, she said by way of greeting. This whole situation is really taking a toll on you, isn't it? You know about the situation? Honey, everyone knows about the situation. Your wife's car has been parked at Sean Rader's place 3 nights a week for the past 2 months. Did you really think nobody would notice? Everyone knows. Of course they do. Why didn't anyone tell me? What were we supposed to say? Hey, Pierce, your wife is cheating on you with the real estate guy. That's not exactly casual conversation material. She had a point. But now that you know, she continued, what are you planning to do about it? I'm planning to make sure everyone else knows, too. Mrs. Harper's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Oh, this is going to be good. What do you need from me? Information. You see everything that happens in this neighborhood. I need to know their patterns, their schedules, when they're together and when they're not. I can do better than that, she said, pulling out her phone. I can give you photos. She scrolled through her camera roll, showing me dozens of pictures. Cleo arriving at Sean's condo, the 2 of them leaving together in his car. Sean bringing flowers to my house when I was at work. Even a few shots of them at various restaurants around town. Mrs. Harper, you're a regular private investigator. Honey, I've been married 3 times. I know what cheating looks like, and I know how to document it. Why are you helping me? She set down her phone and looked at me seriously. Because you're a good man, Pierce Eldrow. You've lived in that house for 15 years, you've never caused any trouble, you shovel my driveway in the winter without being asked, and you don't deserve what they're doing to you. Finally, someone on my team. There's something else, she said. Something you need to know about Sean Rader. What? He's broke. Oh, he puts on a good show with the fancy car and the expensive suits. But his real estate business is failing. I have a friend who works at the bank, and she says he's behind on everything. Car payments, condo fees, business loans, everything. So Cleo's funding his lifestyle with our money. Mrs. Harper, you're a treasure. I know, dear. Now what's the plan? Thursday evening, I was ready to make my first public move. The monthly school board meeting was being held at the high school, and I knew Cleo would be there. She'd been elected to the board 2 years ago as part of her effort to build her profile in the community. I arrived early and took a seat in the back row, where I could watch everything without being too obvious. Cleo was sitting at the board table, looking professional and competent in her navy blue suit. Sean was in the audience, 3 rows from the front, probably there to provide moral support for his girlfriend. How touching. The meeting was routine stuff until they got to the budget discussion. That's when I stood up. I have a question about the proposed technology upgrades, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Cleo looked surprised to see me. Pierce, I didn't know you were coming tonight. I'm a concerned parent and taxpayer. I think I have a right to understand how my money is being spent. Of course. What's your question? I'm wondering about the bidding process for the electrical work. As a local contractor, I'd like to know if this is going to be an open and transparent process, or if certain people are going to get preferential treatment based on their personal relationships. There was a murmur from the audience. Cleo's face went pale. All bidding processes are conducted according to state guidelines, she said carefully. That's good to hear, because I'd hate to think that someone might use their position on this board to benefit their friends, or their close personal acquaintances. I let my eyes drift over to Sean, who was suddenly very interested in his phone. I think we can move on to the next item, Cleo said quickly, but I wasn't done. One more thing. I noticed in the budget that there's money allocated for a new security system. Given some of the questionable behavior I've observed lately, I think that's a wise investment. You never know who might be sneaking around where they don't belong. The room was quiet. Even the other board members were staring. Thank you for your input, Mr. Eldrow, the board president said. We'll take your comments under advisement. As I walked out, I could feel every eye in the room following me. Mrs. Harper, who was sitting near the front, gave me a subtle thumbs up. Round 1 to Pierce. Friday morning, Cleo confronted me in the kitchen before I left for work. What the hell was that last night? She demanded. What was what? You know exactly what I'm talking about. That performance at the school board meeting. I was participating in local government. I thought you'd be proud of me for taking an interest in community affairs. Pierce, you were trying to embarrass me. Were you embarrassed? Why would you be embarrassed unless you had something to be embarrassed about? She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was just guessing. Is there something you want to tell me, Cleo? Like what? Like why you've been working so many late nights lately. Like why our joint checking account is missing $3,000 in cash withdrawals. Like why Mrs. Harper keeps seeing your car in places where you're not supposed to be. Her face went white. Mrs. Harper is a nosy old woman who needs to mind her own business. Maybe, or maybe she's the only honest person left in this neighborhood. Cleo grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I don't have time for this conversation, Pierce. Some of us have real work to do. Give my regards to Sean, I called after her. She stopped in the doorway but didn't turn around. Then she left without another word. She knows that I know. Good. Let her sweat for a while. That afternoon, I got a call from Detective Harris. Pierce, I've got some interesting news about your friend Sean Rader. He's not my friend, Ray. What's the news? We got another complaint about him yesterday, this time from a client who says he misrepresented the condition of a property and tried to pressure her into a quick sale. She's talking about filing a formal complaint with the real estate board. Sounds like his business practices are catching up with him. That's not all. I did some digging, and it turns out he's got some serious financial problems. We're not talking about a few missed payments here, Pierce. This guy's leveraged to the eyeballs and sinking fast. Perfect. Thanks for letting me know, Ray. Pierce, I don't know what your connection to this guy is, but be careful. When people get desperate, they do stupid things. I'll keep that in mind. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of staying home and pretending I didn't know where Cleo was, I drove to Sean's condo complex with a plan. I parked across the street and waited. At 9:47 p.m., Cleo's BMW pulled into the visitor parking area. I watched her walk to the building entrance, use her key, and disappear inside. Then I called Sean's condo. Hello? His voice was relaxed, probably expecting a call from a client or friend. Sean Rader? Yeah, who's this? This is Pierce Eldrow. I think it's time we had a conversation. There was a long silence. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You're talking to my wife right now, aren't you? Tell her I said hello. Look, man, I think you've got the wrong idea. I've got photos, Sean. Lots of them. I've got emails. I've got bank records. I've got everything I need to make your life very complicated. What do you want? I want you to come downstairs, right now. We're going to have a little chat. I'm not coming downstairs. Yes, you are. Because if you don't, tomorrow morning I'm going to start making some phone calls to your clients, to the real estate board, to Detective Harris down at the police station, who's very interested in your business practices, and to my lawyer, who's already drawn up divorce papers that name you specifically as a correspondent. Another long silence. Give me 5 minutes, he said. Finally, time to meet the competition. Sean Rader looked exactly like what he was, a man who spent more money on his appearance than I made in a month, and who was currently scared out of his mind. He emerged from his building wearing designer jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my work boots, his perfectly styled hair slightly mussed from whatever he'd been doing with my wife. I stayed in my truck, letting him walk across the parking lot to me. Power dynamics matter, and I wanted him to come to me. Get in, I said when he reached the passenger door. He hesitated. I'd rather talk out here. I'd rather not give Mrs. Harper more photo opportunities than she already has. Get in the truck, Sean. He climbed in reluctantly, leaving the door open like he might need to make a quick escape. Up close, he was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of smooth good looks that came from expensive skincare products and a gym membership he actually used. Nice truck, he said, clearly trying to break the tension. Classic Ford, right? Cut the small talk. We both know why we're here. Look, Pierce. Can I call you Pierce? I think there might be some misunderstanding. 6 months, I interrupted. That's how long you've been screwing my wife. That's not a misunderstanding, Sean. That's a pattern. His face went red. It's not what you think. Really? Then explain to me what it is. Cleo and I, we're friends. We work out at the same gym. We have coffee sometimes. We talk about business. You have coffee at Romano's Wine Bar. You talk about business in hotel rooms. And you work out horizontally. Jesus, you really do have photos. Gotcha. I have everything, Sean. Photos, emails, bank records showing that my wife has been funding your lifestyle, witness statements from neighbors who've seen you coming and going from my house when I'm at work. I've got enough evidence to bury you both. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the windshield at his condo building. What do you want? I want you to understand something. Cleo thinks she's trading up, but she's actually trading down. Way down. See, I know about your financial problems. I know about the complaints against your business. I know you're about 6 weeks away from losing everything. My business is fine. Your business is a house of cards, and the wind is starting to blow. The only reason you're not bankrupt already is because my wife has been subsidizing your overhead with money from our joint accounts. That's not true. $3,000 in cash withdrawals over the past 2 months. Want to tell me where that money went? He slumped in the seat. Cleo offered to help with some temporary cash flow issues. Cleo offered, or you asked? It was her idea. Of course it was. She always did like to play the savior. Here's what's going to happen, Sean. You're going to end this thing with my wife. Tonight. You're going to tell her it was a mistake, that you're not ready for a serious relationship, whatever story you want to sell. But it's over. And if I don't? Then tomorrow morning, I start making phone calls. First to your remaining clients, letting them know about the complaints that have been filed against you. Then to your creditors, letting them know about your cash flow problems. Then to the local newspaper, which I'm sure would love to run a story about a real estate agent who seduces married women and uses their money to prop up his failing business. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and showed him Mrs. Harper's photos. Does this look like a bluff? He stared at the screen, his face getting paler with each image. You can't prove the money thing. Bank records are public information in a divorce proceeding, Sean. And once the story gets out, how long do you think it'll take before other women come forward? Women you've befriended while helping them buy or sell houses. That hit home. His hands started shaking. You're destroying my life. No, Sean. You destroyed your own life. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. What about Cleo? What happens to her in all this? Cleo made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. She loves me. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Sean, Cleo doesn't love you. She loves the idea of you. She loves feeling young and exciting and rebellious. But when the bills come due and the novelty wears off, she'll drop you like a hot wire. You don't know her like I do. I've been married to her for 20 years. I know exactly who she is. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us staring up at his condo windows. I could see Cleo's silhouette moving around inside, probably wondering where he'd gone. She's going to hate you for this, Sean said finally. She already hates me. At least now she'll have a good reason. So what happens now? Now you go upstairs and end it. Clean and simple. And Sean? Yeah? If I ever see you near my wife or my daughter again, we'll have another conversation. One that won't be nearly as polite as this one. He got out of the truck without another word and walked back to his building. I waited until I saw the lights go on in his condo, then I drove home. Cleo didn't come home until almost 3 a.m. I heard her car in the driveway, heard her trying to be quiet as she came upstairs, heard her crying softly in the bathroom before she finally came to bed. I pretended to be asleep, but I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering what story Sean had told her. Whatever it was, it had worked. The affair was over. But I was just getting started. Saturday morning, Cleo was already gone when I woke up. She'd left a note saying she was going to her sister's house for the weekend, that she needed some time to think. Perfect. Time to implement phase 2. I called Mrs. Harper. It's Pierce. Are you free for coffee this morning? Always, dear. Romano's again. Actually, I was thinking somewhere more public. How about the farmer's market downtown? Ooh, even better. More people to see us together. Mrs. Harper understood the game perfectly. We met at the farmer's market, which was crowded with the usual Saturday morning crowd of families and couples browsing the vegetable stands and craft booths. Mrs. Harper had brought her camera, ostensibly to take pictures of the flowers, but I knew she had other targets in mind. So, she said as we walked past the tomato stand, how did your conversation with Sean go last night? He's ending it with Cleo. Just like that? Just like that. Turns out he's not as brave as he pretends to be. And Cleo? Cleo's at her sister's house, probably crying into a pint of ice cream and wondering how her exciting new romance turned into a disaster so quickly. Poor thing, Mrs. Harper said, not sounding particularly sympathetic. So what's next? Next, we make sure everyone in town knows exactly what happened and why. I like the way you think, Pierce Eldrow. We spent the next hour working the crowd. Mrs. Harper was a master at casual conversation, and within 60 minutes she'd managed to mention Cleo's recent difficulties to at least a dozen people. Nothing specific, nothing that could be considered slander, just enough information to get people asking questions. You know, she said as we were leaving, there's a big community barbecue next weekend at Riverside Park. The whole town will be there. Is that so? It would be a shame if something dramatic happened at such a public event. It would indeed. Sunday evening, Cleo came home looking like she'd been through a war. Her eyes were red from crying, her hair was disheveled, and she moved through the house like she was walking through quicksand. How was your sister's? I asked, looking up from the newspaper. Fine. She didn't meet my eyes. Everything okay? You look upset. I'm fine, Pierce. Just tired. Maybe you should get some rest. You've been working so hard lately. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I think I'll go to bed early. Good idea. Tomorrow's a new day. As she headed upstairs, I called after her. Cleo? She stopped but didn't turn around. If there's anything you want to talk about, I'm here. You know that, right? I know, she said quietly and continued up the stairs. She's waiting for me to make the first move, waiting for me to confront her directly, to give her a chance to explain or apologize or try to work things out. She's going to be waiting a long time. Monday morning brought the news I'd been expecting. Jim Morrison called while I was having my coffee. Pierce, I just got a call from Jennifer Walsh. Apparently Cleo's been suspended from her law firm pending an investigation into her conduct. What kind of investigation? Someone sent the senior partners some photographs and emails suggesting that Cleo's been involved in an inappropriate relationship that could reflect poorly on the firm's reputation. Mrs. Harper works fast. That's unfortunate, I said. I hope she can work things out. Pierce, did you... Jim, I told you I wasn't going to do anything illegal. I never said I wasn't going to do anything at all. This is getting complicated. It's about to get a lot more complicated. That afternoon, I was installing new lighting at the community center when I overheard two women talking about Cleo. I heard she's been having an affair with that real estate agent, one of them said. Sean Rader? Really? He seems so sleazy. Apparently it's been going on for months. My neighbor saw them together at that hotel out by the interstate. What about her husband, that nice electrician? Pierce? I feel so sorry for him. He's such a decent guy, and she's been running around behind his back like some kind of teenager. The story's spreading. Good. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I cooked dinner. Real dinner, not just sandwiches or takeout. Pot roast with vegetables, mashed potatoes, homemade rolls. The whole house smelled like the old days, when we were still a family. Cleo came home to find the table set for 3 and me putting the finishing touches on the meal. What's all this? She asked. Dinner. I thought it might be nice to eat together as a family for once. Where's Izzy? Upstairs. I'll call her down in a minute. Cleo sat down at the table, looking confused and wary. Pierce, what's going on? Can't a man cook dinner for his family without having an ulterior motive? You haven't cooked dinner in 6 months. Maybe I'm trying to be less predictable. I called Izzy down, and for 20 minutes we ate dinner like a normal family. I asked about Izzy's school projects. Cleo talked about a case she was working on, carefully avoiding any mention of her suspension. It was almost pleasant. Then, as I was clearing the dishes, I dropped the bomb. Oh, Cleo, I forgot to mention. I ran into Jennifer Walsh at the courthouse yesterday. She said to tell you she hopes everything works out with your situation. Cleo's fork clattered onto her plate. My situation? The suspension. She seemed very concerned about you. How did you? Small town, honey. Word gets around. Izzy looked up from her phone. Mom's suspended? From work? It's temporary, Cleo said quickly. Just a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? Izzy pressed. The kind that happens when people make poor choices, I said, loading dishes into the dishwasher. But I'm sure your mother will figure out how to fix it. Cleo excused herself and went upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard her on the phone, her voice rising in anger. She was probably calling Sean, trying to figure out how the story had gotten out. Good luck with that, sweetheart. Sean's not taking your calls anymore. The Riverside Park Community Barbecue was the social event of the season in our little town. Every year, the entire population seemed to turn out for grilled burgers, live music, and the kind of small-town gossip that could make or break reputations. This year, I planned to make it memorable. I arrived early, wearing my best jeans and a clean work shirt, carrying a cooler full of drinks and my famous potato salad, the recipe my mother had taught me 20 years ago. Mrs. Harper was already there, strategically positioned near the main pavilion where she could see everyone who came and went. Pierce, she called out, waving me over. Perfect timing. I've been saving you a spot. The spot she'd saved was at a picnic table with a clear view of the entire park and within earshot of at least 50 people. Mrs. Harper had thought of everything. Any word from Cleo this morning? She asked as I unpacked my cooler. She left early, said she had some things to take care of. I bet she does. By noon, the park was packed. Families spread out on blankets, kids ran around the playground, and the volunteer fire department was serving up burgers and hot dogs from their massive grill. It was exactly the kind of wholesome community gathering that made our town feel like something from a Norman Rockwell painting. That's when Cleo arrived. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, she wasn't wearing makeup, and her clothes looked like she'd slept in them. She walked through the crowd like she was navigating a minefield, clearly aware that people were staring and whispering. She spotted me at the picnic table and headed over, her jaw set in determination. Pierce, we need to talk. Sure, I said, not getting up. Have a seat. Want some potato salad? Privately. Why? We're all friends here. Mrs. Harper was practically vibrating with excitement, her phone discreetly positioned to capture whatever was about to happen. Pierce, please, this is important. So is community fellowship. Sit down, Cleo. Tell everyone how you've been spending your time lately. She looked around at the faces watching us. Neighbors, co-workers, parents from Izzy's school. Everyone was pretending to mind their own business while obviously listening to every word. You're being cruel, she said quietly. I'm being honest. There's a difference. Please don't do this here. Do what? Have a conversation with my wife at a public event? What's wrong with that? That's when Sean showed up. He looked even worse than Cleo, if that was possible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive clothes were wrinkled, and he had the desperate look of a man whose carefully constructed world was falling apart. Cleo, he called out, jogging over to our table. I've been trying to reach you all morning. The conversations around us stopped. Everyone was staring now, not even pretending to look away. Sean, Cleo said, her voice barely above a whisper. You shouldn't be here. We need to talk. About what happened the other night, about everything. I think you've done enough talking, I said, standing up for the first time. Both of you. Sean finally seemed to notice that we had an audience. His face went pale as he realized that half the town was watching this little drama unfold. Pierce, man, I can explain. Explain what? How you've been having an affair with my wife for the past 6 months? How you've been using our money to pay your bills? How you've been sneaking around behind my back while I worked 60-hour weeks to support my family? The crowd was silent now. Even the kids had stopped playing. It's not like that, Sean said weakly. Then tell me what it's like, Sean. Tell everyone what it's like. Pierce, stop, Cleo pleaded. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? I laughed, a sound that carried across the entire park. Cleo, I've been faithful to you for 20 years. I've worked my ass off to give you everything you wanted. I've supported your career, put up with your complaints about how boring I am, and never once gave you a reason to doubt my commitment to our marriage. Pierce, and you, I turned to Sean, you're a broke, desperate con man who preys on married women because you can't make it on your own. Your business is failing, you're behind on every bill you have, and the only reason you're not living in your car right now is because my wife has been paying your expenses. That's not true, Sean said, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? Then let's call Detective Harris over here and ask him about those complaints that have been filed against your business. Or better yet, let's call your bank and ask them about your loan status. Sean's face went white. He looked around at the crowd, realized that his reputation in this town was now completely destroyed, and did the only thing he could think of. He ran, just turned around and sprinted toward the parking lot like his pants were on fire, leaving Cleo standing there alone in front of everyone. Cleo, I said, my voice carrying across the silent park. You wanted excitement. You wanted someone who would take risks and live life to the fullest. How's that working out for you? She started crying then, big ugly sobs that shook her whole body. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You've destroyed everything, she said through her tears. My job, my reputation, Your marriage, I finished. No, Cleo, you destroyed that all by yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. I walked over to where the fire department had set up their sound system for the afternoon's entertainment. Excuse me, I said to Chief Williams, who was adjusting the microphone. Mind if I make an announcement? He looked confused, but handed me the mic. Sure, Pierce. What's up? I walked back to the center of the pavilion, where the entire crowd could see and hear me clearly. Cleo was still standing by the picnic table, tears streaming down her face, probably realizing that whatever I was about to say would be heard by everyone who mattered in our small town. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice echoing across the park, I want to thank you all for coming out today. This community has always been important to me, and your friendship and support over the years has meant everything. There were murmurs of approval from the crowd. People were still confused about what was happening, but they could sense that something significant was building. Some of you may have heard rumors lately about problems in my marriage. I want to set the record straight, because I believe this community deserves the truth. Cleo was shaking her head frantically, mouthing, "Please don't," over and over. For the past 6 months, my wife has been having an affair with Sean Rader. She's been using money from our joint accounts to support his failing business. She's been lying to me, to our daughter, and to all of you about where she's been spending her time. The crowd was completely silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. I know some of you are thinking, why is he telling us this? Why make it public? And the answer is simple. Because for 6 months, I've been the only person in this town who didn't know what was going on. Everyone else knew. Everyone else saw the signs, noticed the patterns, figured out the truth, but nobody told me. I looked around at the faces in the crowd, seeing guilt and shame in more than a few eyes. So now everyone knows everything. My marriage is over. My wife chose someone else, someone she thought was more exciting than the boring electrician she married 20 years ago. And you know what? Maybe she was right. Maybe I am boring. Maybe I am predictable. Pierce, Cleo started to say, but I held up a hand to stop her. But here's what I'm not, I continued. I'm not a liar. I'm not a cheat. I'm not someone who breaks promises or betrays the people who trust me. I'm not someone who takes money that doesn't belong to me or manipulates others for my own benefit. I looked directly at Cleo, who was now sobbing openly. I'm not someone who throws away 20 years of marriage for a few months of excitement with a con man. I handed the microphone back to Chief Williams and walked toward the parking lot, my steps slow and deliberate, each one carrying the weight of the moment I'd just unleashed. Behind me, the stunned silence stretched like a held breath. People weren't whispering, weren't shifting in their seats. They were frozen. And in the middle of it all was Cleo, her shoulders trembling, her makeup running, staring at the ground like she could still find some version of the story where she wasn't the villain. Her tears didn't move me. Not anymore. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass, the kind that always made the park look peaceful, like the kind of place where families made memories and neighbors trusted one another. Today, it looked like a stage where a truth 20 years overdue had finally been dragged into the sunlight. I was halfway to my truck when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Mrs. Harper, Cardigan, Pearls, the unofficial mayor of neighborhood gossip, caught up with me, breathing hard as though she'd sprinted. "Pierce," she said, placing a hand on her chest to steady herself. That was something else. I've never seen anything like it. It needed to be said, I answered, and I wasn't being dramatic. Someone had to cut through the lies. Someone had to stop pretending. Today, it just happened to be me. She looked back toward the pavilion, her brow wrinkled in sympathy, though whether it was for me or for the spectacle, I couldn't tell. Cleo still stood there, alone, while people slowly drifted away from her. A few offered a pat on the shoulder, an awkward hug, murmured words they didn't mean, but most kept their distance, unsure whether comfort would pull them into the fallout. "What happens now?" Mrs. Harper asked. I took a slow breath, letting the question settle. What happens now? Everything and nothing at the same time. Now, I said, she gets to live with the consequences of her choices, and I get to start over. Mrs. Harper's voice softened. Are you okay? For a moment, I didn't answer. The question deserved more than reflexive politeness. I leaned against the truck door and really considered it. 20 years of marriage, gone like dust in a hard wind. Weekends spent building a life I thought we both wanted. Holidays, plans for retirement. That whole picture-perfect future we used to talk about lying on our backs in the grass, looking up at the stars. My family fractured. My reputation dragged into the mud. My timeline for life shredded. Everything felt uncertain, like I was standing at a crossroads with no signs and no map. And yet, for the first time in months, I felt something like clarity. You know what, Mrs. Harper? I said slowly. I think I am okay. For the first time in a long time, I feel like myself again, like I can breathe. She nodded, eyes soft. What about Izzy? Izzy. 15, stubborn, brilliant, and too easily dazzled by excitement, by rebellion, by anything that looked like freedom from small-town predictability. Izzy will figure it out, I said. Eventually she'll learn that excitement isn't the same thing as happiness, and reliable doesn't mean boring, it means someone shows up. I climbed into my truck, the familiar creak of the seat grounding me. The engine rumbled to life. Through the windshield, I saw Cleo walking slowly toward her car. Shoulders slumped, movement small, as if her body was finally acknowledging what her pride had refused to admit. Alone, exposed, broken in ways she'd never imagined. They wanted a villain, I thought as I shifted into drive. And today, I gave them a legend. A story that would echo through every church gathering, every group chat, every backyard barbecue. Let them choke on it. Let them remember every detail. I pulled out of the lot as an old country song drifted from the radio. One of those nostalgic tunes about roads taken, bridges burned, second chances earned. Ordinarily, I would have changed the station, but today the lyrics settled over me like a clean, easy truth. For the first time in months, I smiled. Not because triumph tasted sweet. It didn't. Not because I enjoyed the wreckage. I didn't, but because I was free. Free from lies whispered behind locked doors. Free from pretending not to notice the shift in her eyes. Free from the suffocating fear that I was the fool in my own marriage. I drove slowly through town, taking it all in, as if memorizing it one final time. Past the courthouse where I had filed the divorce papers just hours earlier, the stamped documents still fresh in my glove compartment. Past the law firm where Cleo used to work until her after-hours activities became too public to hide. Past Sean's condo, his precious Porsche missing from its usual spot, probably moved to avoid becoming the centerpiece of the town's hottest scandal. By Monday morning, everyone would know. By Friday, it would be in the newspaper, maybe even online. Cleo would have to find a new home, a new job, a new life. She'd have to face the raw truth she'd buried for years. And me? I had responsibilities. A business to keep afloat. A daughter to guide through the aftermath. A future to rebuild from scratch. It wouldn't be glamorous. It wouldn't be simple or easy. But it would be honest. It would be real. It would be mine. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw that Mrs. Harper had somehow beaten me home. Her blinds were already drawn, just enough for her to peek out, probably uploading the first wave of photos taken at the barbecue and calling anyone who hadn't been there. Good, I thought. Let the truth spread fast and hard. Let everyone know exactly what happened. And why. I stayed in the truck for a few minutes, looking at the house I'd called home for 15 years. The place felt different now. Not in a tragic way, but in a finished way, like the last chapter of a book you weren't meant to keep rereading. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of selling it, dividing property, clearing out closets full of memories, the good ones, the painful ones, the ones I'd spent years trying to ignore. I wasn't looking forward to it, but I wasn't afraid either. Tonight, though? For the first time in months, I felt the promise of real sleep waiting for me. Deep, dreamless, peaceful. The truth was finally out, and I was finally free.